You're essentially in like a feast or famine problem, right? Like some months you're having like huge celebrities, you're landing these big celebrity deals, you're working with like lots of creators that have large followings, right?
You say yes and you solve it later. That's kind of and that's the name of the game when you're working with, the A tier.
Like, oh, you have a supercar? Cool, I instantly think you're a douchebag.
Guys, my name's Rhett and welcome to Chasing Dragons.
Rhett, welcome to the show, dude. This is the first time seeing you in person, and your hair is so cool, and mine is so not. I'm going bald. It sucks.
Thank you. No, you're killing it with the beard, dude. I love it.
I appreciate that. Cool, guys. Here we go. Rhett is the founder of Billion Dollar Brands, a company that helps celebrities, influencers, and creators turn their attention into revenue through licensing, brand partnerships, and strategic deal making. Rhett's been in the game for nearly a decade. He was raised in it. His father is a veteran in the celebrity licensing space, and Rhett grew up immersed in the world of high-profile brand deals. While his dad built the traditional side of the business, Rhett carved out his own niche by working with digital native talent, influencers, athletes, and creators who've built audiences online. He's brokered partnerships, built brand extensions, and helped big names monetize through licensing. But the business still swings wildly from quarter to quarter. Some deals are massive, but many fall through. Others take months of effort and stall just before the close, and without a clear niche or system, Rhett often finds himself juggling custom projects across every tier of talent, from celebrities to micro creators. Today's conversation is split into 3 parts. First, we're going to learn what Rhett's business actually does, what makes these kinds of deals so complex. Then we're going to unpack the recurring problems that keep his model from being scalable and consistent. And finally, I'm going to lay out as clearly as I can what I think Rhett needs to do if he wants to stop spinning his wheels and start getting predictable momentum and traction in his business. Sound good, Rhett?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Beautiful. The first part here is understanding your business. Did I get anything wrong in that intro?
No, that sounded great. I appreciate the lead in there. And I'm very excited to discuss what we can do with it.
Absolutely. Cool. So tell me about your business. What do you guys do and how do you make money in your own words?
Yeah, so we monetize talent in simplest terms, and we help them expand their brands via new revenue streams. So that's one of our main focuses, and what that looks like kind of is dependent on the scale of the talent. So a lot of the deals we do are brand sponsorship, brand partnership, but then a lot of the deals we do are licensing and IP monetization. And that's actually where I grew up in the space, is I watched my father build out that niche and build out that model specifically, but that specifically applies to some of the highest caliber talent, right? If someone has a lot of attention but not necessarily a lot of brand equity, you're not going to go and monetize their brand before you go and monetize the audience they built. So we do both types of deals, and that's also where some of the hiccups come from, is working with smaller talent and larger talent concurrently can have you crossing your hairs.
Got it.
In that position, often when we're balancing between the two deals of different scales.
Absolutely. Just so that I fully understand and so that my audience understands, I've looked into this in preparation for this. So when you talk about brand equity versus monetizing somebody's audience, right? So from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but monetizing somebody's brand equity is like a celebrity, right? Like Oprah Winfrey on the box of Wheaties. Got it.
So
cool.
It works for brands too, right? And that's one of the things that's kind of interesting is, brands will come and they'll want to expand their brand equity, and they'll be like, okay, let's expand via new product verticals, name recognition. And that's what that is when we're monetizing brand equity and we're doing licensing deals. We're specifically monetizing the name. And we're like, okay, can we put this on a new product? Well, this affiliation makes sense in this new category. And if that goes together well, like that makes sense. Okay, great. And we'll do those type of deals. But then on a similar scale, sometimes it's like, all right, great. Somebody has like a nice audience and they built a really good fan base online, right? But then like you put their name in a mall, no one's gonna know who they are. So they don't belong on a product shelf, but you can then take them and you can do an affiliation deal. That's one of the things that I really like putting together those social campaigns, because with the smaller talent, if they don't have enough name recognition, you can sort of add them together and do like one big thing of like, 5 to 10 creators. But then you're not channeling their name, you're using all of their audience to channel some other name of like whatever the brand is that you're then pushing. So those are kind of the two main divisions we have there, and it really depends on the scale of the audience that the talent has, but then also how they made it, right? And they we work with a lot of athletes, and a lot of athletes don't really have the same caliber digital footprint that like influencers do, right? However, they have name recognition because of their affiliation with the team. So what's interesting there is like, while they might not be known as a standalone, if you say so-and-so, comma, player from a major sports team that everybody knows, like all of a sudden there is a lot of affiliation leverage there, right? And that's how you build brand too, is, affiliating one thing with another.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're enjoying my conversation with Rhett, go ahead and hit the like button. It really helps out the channel. It tells more entrepreneurs on YouTube to come and watch this show. Also, guys, post a comment. I want to create a community of entrepreneurs. Post a comment specifically if you think I missed anything that could help Rhett on his entrepreneurial journey. Hey, Noah, you missed this, you dumb moron. Like, okay, don't be nice, but you can also subscribe to the YouTube channel, guys. We're trying to hit 2,500 subs by the end of the summer. And now, back to my conversation with Rhett. I think that I had when we first originally spoke, I think I had a slight misunderstanding. I'm more so familiar with like brand agencies, right? Like, monetizing an influencer's like audience via either affiliate links or sponsorships or something, which it sounds like you do a little bit of, but this is more so like IP licensing, right? Like licensing somebody's image to sell a product and endorse that type of a thing. Is that correct?
And we do like a version of both, right? Which is like, that's why when I say I grew up in the space, I actually started on like the talent side. And a lot of the talent side, we go and we do those smaller brand sponsorship deals, the brand partnerships. Okay, I have brands that want me to put together an influencer campaign. Great, I have an old roster. I can, contact them, and, I go to the talent agencies, and that all works, right? Like, I've got a friend over at UTA, a friend over at Gershon. We need to make something happen, we can make something happen, right? However, when it comes to like monetizing the celebrity as a brand, that actually is where we're taking them and monetizing them and leveraging their IP. And so we do both. But, our niche, our bread and butter is that celebrity licensing.
Got it. Cool. All right. Cool. Rhett, what are some of the problems? This is the part of the conversation where you get to complain as much as possible. Give me your problems. What are the problems in your business? Start with the big ones. What are your biggest problems?
Yeah, so because of the caliber of talent, I'd say the top of funnel, the lead flow is inconsistent. So sometimes it's like, oh yeah, no, I talked to somebody and they have, like 20 creators who are all perfect and like, the 7 to 8 figure following and, and we can do something massive. And then other times it's like, all right, cool. It's literally 3 to 4 months later and, we're talking to somebody who's like, got 10 to 20K followers. And it's like, all right, we can kind of monetize, like, but the deals that you can do with the high level and the deals you can do with the small level are not the same caliber. So if you're constantly jumping between the two, like these aren't the kind of things I can comfortably throw into a CRM, right? So that's where I find myself struggling because like I know the traditional like organizational structure, right? But it does feel that the caliber leads to it being disorganized, and then it also leads to both the top and the middle, either the follow-up component or the actually bringing in of the A tier to be both hit or miss, and that's where I think that it's like sometimes when it's good, it's real good, and then when it's when it's less good, it's like I miss when it was good,
Absolutely. Cool. Okay. So, from my understanding, it's you're essentially in like a feast or famine problem, right? Like some months you're having like huge celebrities, you're landing these big celebrity deals, you're working with like lots of creators that have large followings, right? Other months, like those deals kind of dry up, and then you have months where you're working with people with 20 to 40,000 followers, really struggling.
Audiences and there's nothing wrong with nano-influencers, but the deals are not the same type, and the structures has changed dramatically, and then also the opportunities are much harder to find for the smaller talent, right? So there is something about A-tier celebrities that also brings A-tier pull, and you can put together major brand deals a lot faster.
Sure. Cool. Okay, so lead flow, like essentially this problem with like big leads coming in or inconsistently, and then kind of like having to work with kind of like smaller creators. Any other problems aside from that you identify in the business before we kind of jump into these things?
Mid-funnel piece where it's like, all right, you get the people in, you get a lot of conversation, and then it's like, it's so interesting how fickle this industry is, and I think a lot of that has to do with, there's a lot of, like, when you have big names, you have big heads, and that becomes one thing where, sometimes, like, small nuances in numbers create a lot of back and forth, right? So I found that, like, all right, but if you're having like the 12th version of contracting, you sometimes like you just need to get the deal over the hedge, right? So I find the back and forth, because you're working on those schedules and because the talent is so again, like that's also why, like, we, I think there's a real opportunity to go into different subsections because I work with a lot of different types of talent, and like the athletes, they work on their their seasonal schedules, right? And then the artists, they work on tour dates. So, and those things conflict, and but if they're on tour, like if you're trying to set up a deal for that, like it's all time sensitive, right? And I may have mentioned even right now, I'm working with this race car driver, but we had to have him on the racetrack like August 8th for it to everything to work out perfectly. But in order to do that, we were doing the negotiations. It was 5 days before. It's August 3rd, and we're still going back and forth on this thing, that thing, the other thing. It's at one point you just need to say great, let's get it done, and let's get this guy there, and let's book the flight. So that's one of those things where the time sensitivity leads to the deals almost being time crunched, right? So you're playing against the clock almost for every specific season or every specific tour, And that's part of the fun, I like the game, don't get me wrong, that's part of why I'm in it, But then at the same time, it things that could be more strategic is okay, great. How do you build around that in advance to basically get, where all of a sudden it's you're not mid conversation, but now it's okay, great. Well, if somebody has to fly out somewhere and they're gone,
Sure. Cool. Okay. So just to confirm I want to make sure I really truly understand your problems here. So the issues that I'm hearing are scheduling, right? Like athletes work in seasonal schedules, artists work on tour dates. You were working with this Formula One driver, and there was time sensitivity and things there with his race and everything. And it's all time sensitive, and a lot of these people, because they are big celebrities, they have large egos, I would assume, and are kind of difficult to work with sometimes. They all kind of
a lot of back and forth, that's
yeah.
part of what it is,
Sure.
That's
got it.
the name of the game,
Cool. So inconsistent leads, kind of when you don't have those big names, then you're working with low people with not a lot of following. You've got you describe this as a mid funnel piece. There's a lot of ego, people kind of pushing back against how things are done. You say the industry
in a deal already, and then based on both the time sensitivity and then somebody having extra thoughts that need to get reviewed one more time. Because that pushes out the timeline the same vein,
Yeah.
So
cool. And then you were considering niching down, but at the same time, when these big shark people come in, I can it makes sense to me why you're having struggle niching down, because each person is so influential. It seems like the celebrities that you're working with have such big followings that what are you going to do? Are you going to say no? Exactly. Yeah. Are you going to say no when Post Malone starts bringing up your phone and you're like, oh, I'm not going to work with you? It's no, I'm going to figure this out. So no, that makes a lot of sense.
You say yes and you solve it later. That's kind of, that's the name of the game when you're working with, the A tier. But then it's also okay, when you don't have the A tier, you're not going to go and chase them because that burns a relationship, right? So it's if you're the guy that's all right, the 7-3 target on so-and-so's phone, it's all right, dude, stop, hitting me up. You know where we are, when we're backstage at a tour. It's context matters, right?
Sure.
So,
absolutely. Cool. Okay. So at this point here, this is where I'm going to kind of share my thoughts. My thoughts are my subjective thoughts, it doesn't mean that I'm automatically correct, but I've thought through this a lot, and I do think I have some valuable stuff to share with you, Rhett, and I want to make sure that
I'm excited.
Here we go. Cool. So yeah, we've talked a little bit about the different things that you're doing, right? So it seems like you are doing, so how much of the brand manager stuff, so I think that you're doing three things, right? You're doing the licensed broker thing, right? Celebrity endorsement stuff. You're doing brand management, you mentioned, right? You're helping brands, you're helping small creators build their brands. Is that what you're doing as well?
That's kind of on, it divides, right? So I'd say most of the focus is on the scaling of the brands via monetization and new verticals and the brand deals, right? So I call that brand management, but it's a version of the same thing. That nests the brand deals underneath it.
Got it. And then I broke it out here as campaign fulfillment partner, right? So for brands. So that's on the brand side, right? So
yes, because we work with such a vast caliber of talent that it makes sense. We get inbound on both sides at this point.
Got it. Cool. So I see kind of three different parties in this, right? I see the big celebrities. I see the medium tier to low tier celebrities of online influencers, and then the brands. Would you agree that those are kind of the three parties, or am I missing anybody?
Yes, and I like to differentiate celebrities and then influencers, right? But like really, it is like you said. There's the A tier and there's the B tier. You
Yep.
know.
And that's kind of what most of my thoughts come down to is like more differentiation between A tier and B tier and like and then when like here's what I think your main problem is, right? You have like spikes, right? You have like, most of the year sucks and then you like land a giant whale and then like, you try to keep them around for as long as possible and then like, the rest of the year kind of just like is flat and you're chasing your
You
tail.
can
Is that fair or not?
you can coast like especially because some deals like if you get one big royalty based like licensing deal, they pay out every quarter. So there is something about like if you set up the right thing of the highest caliber, you can eat off that for a minute, you
Cool.
know?
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
so
Yeah.
that makes sense is like the attractive thing to chase. However, I almost feel like the smaller deals are still needed because like I feel like maybe this is a personal discomfort thing, but I feel like I need that extra padding, right? And maybe it's more of the big solves for getting less of the small, or maybe I'm getting caught in the middle, but it definitely feels there could be room for growth.
Okay, so I think you've got like a little bit of paralysis here, right? I think that like you are caught in between, am I everything to everyone, right? Like should I continue to work with these small influencers or should I just chase these celebrities, right? And like should I or okay, here's the two options in my mind, right? It's like, do I stop working with the low level talent and I just focus all of my time and energy going out and chasing those big celebrity deals, right? Because I think that if you focused on that and you set a threshold of like, I am not going to work with a person unless they have this level of influence, right? I think that if you set that bar and then you gave yourself, it seems like you're like sitting on your hands at points. And so when you start to sit on your hands, you're like, okay, shit, like I now need to go and like scrape the bottom of the barrel to like go find like influencers with less and less following in order to like keep things moving. Is that kind of fair?
I mean, definitely valid because
Got it.
especially with the A tier, right? There is something about like in theory you could just go and chase more deals for more talent of the higher tier.
But
And
those
you
people aren't
notice how
coming
there's kind
in.
of two different models, right? So that's because I'm kind of teeter-tottering with the question of do you treat the celebrity as the consumer, right? And with certain level of deals, you don't need to because it is the highest tier. But then with that, just below the age, like, they have the influence and they have the capital to a point where, in theory, it's a great. You can have them be the client, and you're growing their brand. You expand them in the new verticals there, and it's the base retainer plus commission type model there. Versus like with the brand plus talent model, it's like okay, great, you eat off the retainer from the brand, and then you eat off the commission from getting the talent brought in, and then it's almost why you have to keep the small talent around. It's like okay, I'm going and doing other deals for the brand where it makes sense to have the small ones just to show them.
Yeah. So here's like the two strategic options that I see. And you let me know if you agree with this or if you don't agree with this, right? If you're to make the ultimate version of this business, I think that like you recognize that like you need to lock down and do some like model work to make sure that like your model is locked in so that things feel consistent and you don't feel like you're constantly chasing, right? To level out your revenue so that things are more consistent. So here's the two ways that I think are on the table to do that, right? I think the first way is to kind of like refine and better articulate what you're doing right now, right? So you define A tier celebrities when they come in and those people you take care of to the best of your ability, but then you make like a lower subclass of like your services for that B tier level, right? You define exactly who goes in there, and then you make marketing campaigns to get those people in there, right? And you try to automate a lot of your intake. Because another thing that we talked about was like, as you are yeah. So you were saying like as you are educating the consumer, the right people fall off, right? And that to me, and so I went to your website, right? Billion Dollar Brands, I think it was billiondollar brands.us, right?
Yes.
So I went there and it is essentially a landing page with, collecting email addresses. So I guess my point is that I think that if we went that route with your business, I can give you my thoughts on how I would better do that. Or the other option is I want to move away from the low level talent and I just want to focus entirely on the A tier talent, right? Where I'm going to create a white glove service that does, like custom high level advertising and brand endorsement deals for these really high tier celebrities, right? Hearing both of those options, do you agree that those are kind of the two options on the table, or am I neglecting to consider something.
No, I think you're totally right there. It's one of those things where, I need to basically segment the two and then lean into setting up that bottom as autonomous and then circle back to that at the very top, right? And that's something which I think actually does make a lot of sense. And that's part of why I keep pulling towards some of those lower tier creators, because I do know that there's an opportunity there too. And like having a background in marketing, that actually does make sense to basically, okay, service this class of creator and then help them expand to a tier, because they're at the tipping point of their careers, but they're not at a point where they can do those 8-tier deals. But if I could basically incubate them, I could effectively use the one to feed the other, and that becomes really interesting.
Yeah. Here's what I genuinely think is that like part of the risk in that is that if you just focus on those A-tier celebrities, like I do think that is an option, especially if that's where like the nut of the business is coming in. Like there is a school of thought to say that everything that you should be doing is trying to facilitate those deals better. Here's what genuinely. Okay, actually, you know what? Let's just have this conversation of like how you could work on that A tier celebrity, like making that smoother, because you're going to do that regardless, right? That seems to be like where the main revenue generation mechanism is in your company. So here's just what I would do for this. I would make a list of every single person that you've ever worked with, right? Those A tier celebrities. Maybe you have that. How many would you say that is? Is that like dozens, or is that like 10 or less, or how many like big celebrities?
It's probably somewhere around like 50 to 60 of like
Beautiful.
the AA talent.
Cool. Here's what I would do is that I would go through that and I would write down their journey, right? Write down their customer journey, and I would go and pull emails, and I would go and pull like historical communications with those people, right? And I would answer a couple questions about each one of those people, right? Where did they come in from, right? Because you mentioned your dad is really well connected, so I'm assuming that there are a lot of like his family friends that just kind of called him, and like his network calling him, right? Then what types of conversations you've had? Maybe this is like something that you've already done, and maybe get me up to speed on this, but like that's what I would do, is like really looking at that like funnel and that chain of actions of like, this person had a large following, they became aware of our company, how did that happen? And then like they eventually started working with us, and then we built them a deal and it closed, right? I would study each one of those things like really, really compulsively and be like, okay, why did this happen like this? Because this way, if you can understand those like top of funnel behaviors, right? You're saying that you're having problems with lead flow. And in my opinion, if you can reverse engineer like how your top leads actually came in, you can like put it in your own, you can make it something that like you can be responsible for. Like for my show is super simple. Getting leads for my show is pretty easy, right? I go on LinkedIn, I go on Facebook ads, I run Facebook ads, and say, hey, entrepreneurs, come talk to me, right? Super easy. Your lead flow for getting A tier celebrities to come talk to you is gonna be a fucking pain in the ass. So like,
Absolutely, and it's totally different from that bottom tier, which is why it's so attractive to be like, all right, cool, let's go do some easy, monetization deals, and
exactly.
stuff like that, right? And that's why I love to cater to, because like that's fast, right? But then like the highest caliber stuff, like you said, is really bringing in the A tier talent and then doing full white glove service. I mean, because as you said, like it's called billion-dollar brands, and and that stems from like some of the businesses I've worked on billion-dollar brands, but like my father's the one who's really built billion-dollar brands. So like I've seen that, and that's kind of where I got
the name.
For the names. I'm like, oh shit, like, you can really take this thing to 10 figs, like
Sure.
like so that's where I'm like, also like the A tier talent. I'm like, I really like. You're right. Like, if I quite triple down on that, like, there's no reason to even touch doing, creator deals and doing endorsements, and because and again, like, it's just operating on a different caliber at that point. It's just pure IP monetization, brand management, like just the A caliber, right? And that's where I think a lot of the most interesting deals happen there too, because those are also like 3 to 5 year deals. Whereas, I mean, you can have like a drop off of like, after 6 months for, a low ticket retainer, whatever, endorsement, and like, great, that's nice, it pads things, but like, I mean, the deals where I'm like, oh, like that, because, and I'll be honest, like sometimes they're still surprising, because like, it just, like, each one, they're not unique in the structure, but they're unique in the way that the talent and the best in class operator come together, you know. And basically, the best in class operators in lieu of the brand, because then we're building the talent's brand themselves. So that's just for context as to how the celebrity IP monetization works.
Got it. So
So,
they're all pretty unique, and each deal is different, and the brands that work with them are going
but
to be different
the
each time.
structure of the deal is not really, because it's okay. You have a best in class operator, you have talent. Generally, there's a percentage, there's a minimum guarantee, and and then the royalty pays out, on a quarterly basis as opposed to a monthly basis, and that's roughly the same as okay, cool. You go do a retainer deal that pays out every month.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, let's do this. Let's dive deep on like the best deals that you've done, right? Like if you could think of like 2 to 3 of the people, you don't need to name them because I bet like there's like probably weird like rules around like naming the
Yeah,
people
that
and
counts.
exactly. You
Nobody
know,
wants to know who made their brand. You know how that goes.
exactly, exactly. So if you could come up with like, where did those deals start, right? And how did those relationships start? Let's just focus on that. Where do most of these relationships start?
So that's actually really interesting. Is like none of them are cold. That's one thing that I've found is like, and that's why I like the top of the funnel is very hit or miss because it's built on relationships, and that's a very big piece of it. There is like having come from the talent world, it's actually a lot of my colleagues. So I find people from California, like, and I used to live in LA before I moved to Miami, and my friends are out there, and they all like they have people who want to do A-tier deals, right? So that's part of it, right? And I think that leads to, okay, great. I don't want to find myself reliant on other people needing deals because, like, when you're doing deals that are based on inbound, then you're basically stuck needing other people to give you. I've got, this talent needs this and this person needs that. But that, I mean, at the highest level, that is how they came in. It
Got
was
it.
a
Is
friend who already,
relationships.
had the talent side of it and then needed the brand and the deal side of it.
Got it. So let's talk about this. So I think that even with that, right? I think part of the reason why your hands feel tied and you feel like you have to go to these lower level celebrities is because there are not very many things inside of your control that like lead you to cultivating more relationships with those A level celebrities, right? So if we
It's
just
not a
build,
cold business. So that's one of
right?
the things that makes it, very hand tight.
Yeah. So here's my thought is that if we built you some sort of like networking engine, like the idea being like, and I say engine because it's something that you can do repeatedly, right? Like it's something that you can do over and over again with somebody who
Yeah.
might be cold, right? That is a high touch point thing with a person that might be cold, right? And you can provide them something. This is how my business works, right? Is like like I provide you a platform, I provide you my business insights, right? And then like ideally as I build my community, right? It's like I want the community to also offer the entrepreneur insights into their business to kind of like crowdsource ideas from like the crowd, right? So therefore like there is a really good reason for people who have never heard of my name before and who have no idea who I am, right? They want to come on my show because they want the free advice and they want to like have the platform to talk about their stuff, right? So that creates kind of this
Structure. Okay.
that
So
yeah.
in a business like this, what kind of incentive structure would you suggest building out?
So I don't know is the thing is like and it's highly dependent, right? And so like my that's why I'm asking about like when these A tier celebrities come to you, right? Do they have I bet that they're all very very different, but do they all kind of have similar problems? What do they want? How well do you know these people and what do they want?
So, and that's really interesting too, because a lot of times they are looking to expand, but they don't have like a lot of them are very agnostic as to how they expand, which I find is really interesting. Like very like nobody's come to me and like yeah, they've been like build me a skincare brand or build me a new toy collection. Like sure they've been like I have a high value name and I have a high value brand and I want to expand that. How? Where do I go? What do I do? So that's where a lot of it stops for them, and that's where I think a lot of the interesting thing is there is that allows me to leverage relationships on the best in class operator side, where sometimes like I can do more than one celebrity deal, with the high tier talent if I can relate the two things and nest it into one brand. So that's one thing which I found is interesting there too is people can be responsible for the branded side of the celebrity but only in their specific niche because it's based on IP classes, right? So you can do like 3 or 4 different IP class deals for one celeb, and that all of a sudden like sets you up where they then feel that they have a real brand, because their whole thing is like they're not just looking to like, all right, cool, you have to then go and source this and source that, like that's one of the things I found, like the actual best ones don't know where they want to improve next, and like there's a lot of value I can give by just steering them in the right direction as to what deals make sense for their brand.
Got it. Cool. That actually makes a lot of sense. And here's the play that I would recommend then. Okay. I would, so going to your website made me realize that like, it seems like you're positioning, you're talking about how this is relationship based, right? I would try to build supplementary materials that support those relationships, right? Like when you hand out a business card or something, like I know that that's like very 1980s to do, but like, like assuming like
it works, especially like that's one of the things that's also interesting about this is on the best in class operator side, everybody still does that, and there's like, everyone's at licensing expo or licensing Europe, like that's just a very big piece of it too, so like it does operate very, 1980s, 1990s style, because it's like, all right, cool, it's handshakes and meetings.
Here's how I would do this, is that I would get very, very, honestly, I think the right thing for you is to, if you can, drop the whole influencer thing. I would just aim for the big celebrities. That is the smart thing to do. From a strategy perspective.
Shiny object, right?
Exactly.
Like,
from a strategy
that's
perspective.
Also where I got my start, which I think is part of why I think I've been holding on to it, is like, great, I learned from my parents the celebrity side, and then I went to school for, like marketing, and then as I got into marketing, I wanted to carve out my own niche, which is why I was like, let me double down on influencers, right? Because they're the new celebrities, but really the A tier, like the best influencers turn into celebrities anyway.
Yeah.
That's just really how it works.
Yeah.
So the best deals are, celebrity based, because A tier talent just attracts A tier operators. You just do more by operating with the A tier. So
yeah.
I totally hear what you're saying there.
I think if you narrow your focus.
Yeah.
By the way, I think that that's amazing. That requires a lot of self-awareness to acknowledge, like, like I did this thing. I wanted to carve out and be, young buck. Oh, I'm, hey, dad, look at me.
Then too. So like, I don't regret it,
Sure.
Like when I was starting, like, then I was like, all right, cool. This is how I'm different from what my parents are doing. And this is also, a way of like, because I had access to influencers too. I was going to, like a high demand type school that had a lot of that kind of talent. So I was like, all right, cool. Like this is an opportunity to work with, those type of people. So there was a lifestyle component. But now it's like, all right, great. If we're building a successful business, the highest level talent also leads to the highest level deals. So the influencers are becoming kind of a distraction as much as I like them,
Yeah.
Maybe that's just a shiny object,
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like you kind of know where you're going, and you've thought about this. I mean, even in our intake call, you were talking about shiny object syndrome and how like, chasing down these little fish, like it just takes time, right? And so like, I think, like focusing on those A-tier celebrities, right? Let me give you some hard feedback here. Your website sucks, right? It's a landing page, that, right?
Absolutely.
But your website sucks, and I think that your website sucks because like you're in this like, it seems like you're caught in this like, who should I be and to who, right? In my opinion, if you want to make the most money in this and you want to have the most success, and not just money, like, it seems like this actually is what gets you excited, right? You're talking about this F1 driver, you're like, you love this like white glove thing.
It's fun, dude. I gotta be honest.
Exactly.
I absolutely love it. And then
it sounds cool.
Your talent, I don't get stars, but there is something exciting about being like, hey, you see that guy that you all love, like I helped make him a fuck ton of money,
Yeah, exactly.
Cool,
Exactly. So like, cool. So that's what I would focus on, is like positioning yourself to the A tier players, right? To that market, right? Positioning yourself as the guy that you go to when you want to grow your brand and monetize your shit, and you want to get on the Wheaties box, you talk to Rhett. Hey, you want to be on a billboard? I fucking got you. Like, you got to figure out what these people actually want. That's my first piece of advice is like,
but being that guy to those people is like, that really is, the major play, and then kind of letting everything kind of mid to lower to kind of fall off gradually.
Just go. Yeah, exactly.
I feel like that's going to happen organically as I focus on that A-tier market.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. And I really like that advice.
Absolutely, man. And the other thing too, I think, is like creating here's the play, in my opinion. I even think that like, maybe this is a really bad piece of advice because like you don't want to You don't want to devalue your brand, but like you need to create some sort of like repeatable thing that like gets you in the door with these new people, right? And it could be, I mean, back in the day, it used to be like, hey, let's go golfing or whatever, right? Or I'll buy you like box seats at this game or like whatever, right? And sometimes like that makes business sense to like, treat people when you're doing like new introduction stuff. It makes sense to start relationships that way, right? Hey, we're going to go do this fun thing. You want to come for free? Like, and you buy the tickets and you invite this person, right? Trying to do it in a non-needy way. You honestly probably know more about networking with high net worth individuals than I do. But one example that I've seen in the industry work decently well is people use the podcast play pretty well, right? Because like a lot of like these larger celebrities, they want to, expand their online influence, right? And so they start a podcast, right? They say, okay, cool. Like there are some very successful podcasts where they interview some very famous people, and suddenly the hosts of those podcasts suddenly are connected to these people who wanted that influence, right? And so they have access to them all of a sudden, right? That is one potential engine. They identify that the A player wants attention.
And I know it works too, because I'll be honest, one of the guys who I worked with very closely in the info space, he actually had a top 10 podcast. And, that was one of the ways that ended up starting a lot of conversations. So, I know that, the right people are attracted to the right conversation. And then also, those conversations, they're a great way to exude credibility. And that you have that conversation and that, it gives them that platform. It also lets them, immediately hear that you're confident and that you can give them something valuable. So the second that the camera's off, they're like, great, let's continue this,
And Rhett, you're the guy, you're the fucking guy. Like, you've got the hair and you've got the confidence and you've got the mentality that like, and you
gotta do it. That's really it. It's,
yeah.
I mean, leaning into either the long form or the short form, because I mean, like you said, as much as it's about relationships, a lot of them will start generating those relationships and initiating them independently as they see more of me, So
yeah, exactly.
to some extent, one piece is like, maybe I need to celebritize myself.
And that's kind of my point, right? Is like, in that content engine, if one path that you could do is build a podcast or build some sort of content engine that allows you to get into contact with those A-tier celebrities. Now that said, some of them will view that as like, this person is just trying to like ride my clout, right? That's kind of like what he's doing. So if, try to not
both ways, right?
Yeah.
mean, you can't argue against the fact that it works. So
Right.
there is both, right? And they'll be like, okay, yeah, he wants to leverage my name, but really it's, I want, it's a foot in the door because it creates that value, right? And then it's similar, like, how a lot of the events in the space, they'll give, an award,
Perfect.
To
Yes.
get somebody there.
Yes,
And
exactly.
Yeah, no,
Dude,
now they're
I
like,
love the award. The award is fantastic. Like, you could
Fantastic.
start like a quarterly award of like, this is what $1 billion brands awards this person as like, creator of the quarter or year or
future
whatever.
$1 million personal brand, like
Exactly.
I love that,
I think that that's a really good play. That's a perfect engine example of like, because like what that person wants. Online celebrities have huge egos, right? You grow into that sort of person, or not just online, but all celebrities have huge egos, right? Because they're trying to like they're trying to use fame to fill like holes inside of themselves, right? And so like many of these people like want something to fill that hole, and so an award or an external like prestige indicator is something that like they all are going to want, or many of them might want. But anyway,
it also adds value to their top of funnel, and like them monetizing what they're doing. So that's one thing that's really interesting. There's, you give them something that gives them additional perceived credibility to their audience, and it gives them something to post about, a new content additive, like so.
Yep.
Any of those is attractive,
Yep.
right? So that's one of those things where the right, feel good item, and like. And it doesn't have to, because like again, anything where they feel like, all right, you're doing this for the sake of getting access to me, like they're not gonna
Right.
because they're not dumb,
Right. No, of course. And by the way, I'm not saying to make like a scam. I think that like in order to actually legitimize that, like the first thing you need to start working on.
I mean, Michelin stars were based on Michelin tires,
Right.
So it's like, it became a real thing as other people started to care about it.
Exactly,
And
as they
that's one thing
respected
that
it.
I've seen is it snowballs and it legitimizes itself as the right people start to subscribe to it themselves.
Yep.
You know,
So here's
so I think
here's
there is something with that for sure.
let me give you another idea about your content engine, right? Instead of like trying to land these A-tier celebrities, one thing that you might start with is like interviewing the brand partners that you already have, right? And being like, hey, like trying to learn as much as you can about them, right? Because these A-tier celebrities, if they see that you are associated with these brand partners, right, then like that might be what they want, right? They want to work with these types of brands. And so therefore, if you have like a gritty conversation with these brand partners about like understanding what they want out of a celebrity endorsement or something, like that's going
Demonstrating credibility and access at the same time. Yeah,
exactly.
I
Exactly.
really like that.
So, and then your website becomes a place where you
It
post
needs to
your
actually
content.
be like an inbound lead gen funnel right now, because like right now
Exactly.
it's a splash page, you know, and like
Exactly.
okay, great, you know, I have a holder up there, but it doesn't do anything to generate me new leads and new clients, you know, in this niche.
Exactly. And then it also needs to position you. It doesn't, you're saying it needs to be an
It
inbound.
doesn't even have my name on it, to be honest. I mean, like, you know,
Exactly.
it's not like it's not set up to generate inbound, you
Right.
know,
It needs,
and
to be
I'm
honest
guilty
with
of
you,
that, you
to
know,
be
because I
honest
know
with you,
that like that works too.
your your business is a real business that is generating real revenue. Like it needs a $10,000 website. You need to go pay a really good web designer to build a really good fucking
I know
website.
you're right. That's the worst part.
And maybe that's way too much. It needs $1,000 at first. It just needs
Yeah, but
effort.
I need somebody A tier to make an A tier site. You know, I mean, if
Yes.
I'm working with $1 billion brands, I mean, you have to
Yes.
have $1 billion inbound. You
And
know,
that's exactly correct. Is like, even before, like, here's the other thing is that, like, when you are working with those top level players, like, you're not running ads. You're not doing all this, like, scammy shit. Like, no, just make a
but they
really
have to be
nice.
able to go somewhere and see something, right? And that's one
Exactly.
of the things. Like, all right, if they're not googling my name and reading the articles, you know, great. Well, you know, they're gonna go to my site, you know, and the
Exactly.
site has to show them what's up.
And as you're building those relationships and you're handing out those business cards, and you're connecting with those people on social media and they are constantly seeing you, talking to, when you say marketing, what type of marketing is your background in? Like what specifically is it in? When you say marketing, because I feel like, because my background's in
Grew up in
marketing
the
too.
organic social space. Really, like, you
Okay.
know, I went to school and studied like digital media strategy. So, you know, kind of very narrowly like focused on the creative side and like mastering the algorithms, you know?
Got it.
So like I'm not a paid ads guy, I'm an influencer marketing guy, and then I'm an organic guy. So I spent a lot of time playing that game, and like, you know, we do the AI clip farm thing too. So like I know that world, and I know, you know, which buttons you press, because like, and you know, even now, watch. I mean, you know, the industry changed at the beginning of the summer again, you know, because like they just switched over Instagram to SEO. So it's like, you know, there's a lot of different nitpicky things, and I'm very tapped into that world. You know, and
Beautiful.
that's honestly like that's where I started there, and I never really bothered leaving there, because it's just, you know, like, that is where I think the future of the industry goes to, and that's even where I think a lot of the new celebrities are coming from.
Yeah.
So
So, Rhett, in my opinion, here's what you do is you take that skill set and you apply it to yourself, right? You take all of that brand advice that you would give to other influencers and you just apply it to yourself, right? Trying your best to position yourself to these A-tier celebrities as, hey, you want your name on a billboard, you want your face on a box of Wheaties, like I'm the guy. If you want to be on, an ESPN commercial or whatever the fuck, come talk to me, right? And you position yourself by showing credibility with those brands that you work with, right? Talk to as many of them as publicly as you can, so that people start to associate you with them, right? And then any celebrities that are willing to talk to you on camera, have those interviews, right? And
absolutely.
and talk about the deals that you've done with them if they're open to it. But don't beg. Obviously, you're a person who's grown up in this, so you know that everybody's clout hungry and these people get harassed. So yeah, I think that makes the most sense for this conversation instead of trying to, because I had kind of a thing here where it's like, you could automate a lot of the services for these lower level celebrities and lower level influencers, and you could build this content mechanism that does lead inbound to get them involved, and then you could provide them largely automated services that make their stuff easier, and then you could go on the brand side, you could kind of get brand endorsements to kind of have a network, and you could kind of start an agency network, facilitating deals for large numbers of creators instead of one-off deals with people who with 100,000 followers. That's one way to
That's
scale that.
smart too, and that does work. You know, there is something with the influencer side for sure.
But
But as you pointed out, it's
yeah,
pretty different
But
industry.
but if you are making money doing the A tier celebrity shit, like do that. Do
And
that.
that does, yeah, that does better for us, to be honest. So, I mean, that's just, when you come from that world, like that, it doesn't make sense for me to try and veer off and, scrape the other side of it.
Yep.
And that's
Exactly.
been one of the things I found myself caught in the middle because of it. So, for sure.
Exactly.
I mean, this has been extremely interesting. So, on the personal brands, I do have a question there.
Yeah.
It's maybe, I think you might have some interesting insights here. Given my family's background,
Hmm.
and, like, so I don't know if I've given you this context, but my mother is the chief strategy officer of Rap-A-Lot, the record label that discovered Drake. And, so my dad is former business partners with Tommy Hilfiger. So, I called the company Billion Dollar Brands because, like, he actually has built, like, $6 billion worth of, like, multiple brands. So, like, there is something of, like, working with them and, like, having, like, leveraging that. Like, but, I mean, at the same time, like, I have built a slightly different brand for myself. And like you said, there's kind of a different image and, like, kind of, and, like, there's also something about, like, the leveraging the youth angle, right? So how would you go about, leveraging my parents' background and leveraging, almost doing the family brand angle, and doing, like, like Ullmann Inc. versus, like, going full, Sir Rhett takes the internet, uh,
I love it.
long-haired pirate,
I mean, that's a great question. That's a great question. I would do it. I mean, my approach is different than other people's approach. Like, my approach is just honesty. I really value honesty in all of my marketing, right? I would sit down, like, it seems like your parents are industry players, right? They know their shit, right? They've probably got crazy stories, right? Like, I personally think that, like, instead of trying to, like, deceive people and only give people the right information at the right times, like, I think that you just put all of your information out on the table. Like, hey mom, let's talk about, like, like, cool, like, what was it like to discover Dre and build that company, mom?
But yeah,
Like,
so basically doing all of this, like use my personal brand as the main platform still, and then leverage the stories and the value that I can get from them. Yeah, because, like, because I learned a lot of what I do from them. When I say I grew up in it, I mean, like, I like started working, with and for my parents at, like, basically 14. I mean,
mhm.
I started with an apparel business, and they helped guide that too. Like, my first licensing deal was, like, before I was, like, 17 years old with Waka Flocka.
Yeah.
So, like,
And
but
so
there
here's,
is
Rhett, let
something
me,
to that, right? Like, there's something where it's like, but if I use my brand and then I bring in them to, like, give the context of, like, because to some extent, right, it's, like, almost like, all right, if you could have documented it at the same time, right, almost done like the Gary Vee model, right, that would have been valuable. Great. It's 10 years later. You can retell all the stories. Like, the stories still exist. Everything, and the lessons are still there, right? Because that's also one thing is, like, the industry's circular. So, there is something unique about that but, like, would you go about leveraging, like, my personal brand and my channels with their stories and then leverage their background and credibility and, like, via the interviewing them type deal,
so I mean,
or would I almost build them too via differentiated channels?
yeah, so this is a personal question, right? Like, this is a personal question, and the ultimate answer is, you make that determination for yourself. For me personally, like here's the drawback. Here's the drawback of doing this is that, like, you're going to get haters, right? You're going to be like, you're gonna get a ton of people in your comment section that are like, this dude's a nepo baby, and, like, mommy and daddy. Exactly. And so, like, you have to be prepared for that, right? Like, you have to be prepared to be like, okay, well, hey, like, actually, that's a load of shit,
But
right?
yeah, like you said, so at the end of the day, is the goal to, build a big business, or is the goal to, ignore some of the, hate? Because,
Right.
I think part of the actually playing the game on the highest level means doing the things, regardless, and the things that, we've shown this before, like you said, and there's a reason I know it works. This is why you're saying, okay, great, you know it works, you've done it for other people, apply it to yourself. 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there is something like, yeah, that's been one of my biggest, pain points is I've been like, well, and has there been resistance? Absolutely, because I know that it's coming and I know that the reaction is going to be, a mixed bag. But like you said, what generates the most inbound leads?
It's not even that. Here's
Authenticity and being
I
out there and being, like, present. And no one comes if they don't know who you are. So I've found that too, you know, because it's like the more active across any channel, really, the more receptive other people are, simply because they can find more stuff.
Right.
You know?
Let me give you this too, is that when you do get those type of attacks, I think you should root your identity and your I also think that you should just like not engage with as much of that as possible, right? Like if you have
Don't
somebody,
respond, don't engage,
yeah, delete
don't
them.
clap backs, you know?
Exactly. I used to do that. It's a
But I've seen
fucking
some people
slippery
do
slope.
that, you know?
It's a
And it's
slippery
like,
slope. It just leads to a lot of anger, right? I would root your identity in like, I know I'm skilled at this. Look at these deals from my past that are because of me, because of my wins, not because of mommy and daddy, but because I kicked ass and because I brought my own insights to this, right?
yeah.
And just like
And
feel
lean into
confident.
like the technical skill set. Okay, I got you.
You know, and prove it to yourself, right? Write yourself a letter of like, hey, this is what I do and this is what I bring to this, right? Because like,
Okay.
even if your mom and dad have had a lot of success and you've been able to benefit from that success, like you can still compound on that success. They probably don't understand the internet as well as you do. They probably don't know about as much as digital marketing as you do, right? So like, you know, it's just important to like when you go and you make those relationships public, I really think it's important to like reassure yourself that like, okay, regardless of what these fuckers say on the internet, like, you know, like I know that I have my own things to bring to this.
Yeah.
So that's
And treating it not about like growing is like, you know, my audience, but growing my client base.
exactly.
Then it's like, you know, all right, I can lean into the technical side, you know, and that's been where a lot of like, I think the other piece that's been my resistance to doing it already is like, I feel, you know, or I have felt that I need to double down on the aspirational, right? And basically selling the lifestyle. So I'm like, oh, no, it's like, you know, I don't have the supercar, you know,
Sure.
like,
Yeah,
so
personally,
this is
I
about,
hate
you know,
I don't like that type of marketing. I think that marketing is I don't think it's just not my vibe. Like I would rather I
and
think
it
that
doesn't exude credibility.
yeah, exactly. Like I don't care. Like oh, you have a supercar, cool. I instantly think you're a douchebag. Like that's my fucking like immediate like association is like, "Oh, cool, this
That's
person
funny.
is a poser." And you know, that said like other everybody's subjective, right? But like I am attracted to competence, right? Like if you interview your parents and you solidify like the learnings from their career and you package that and you make that like insights that other people can take away and use that in their own lives, that to me is really cool. You know, that's a lot more beneficial to me than like, you know, hey, look, I'm flexing with my jumbo jet or whatever. Like, but cool. So cool. Rhett, we're reaching the end here. It seems like you kind of have some direction in mind. It seems like you're like headed in the right direction. Um,
100%. This is greatly valuable. Thank you
Hell yeah.
so much, Noah.
Absolutely. Give me one concrete thing that you are going to do within the next 7 days. It's currently the 8th. What are you going to do by the 25th to kind of move you in the right direction? Is there one small kind of like micro step of moving in this identity of this like A
I'm gonna
tier celebrity?
revamp my website and, you know, make sure that that thing actually is, you know, a legitimate lead capture, which actually has the proper information on it, and, you know, tells people, you know, what we do and why. So, you
Beautiful.
know, that's gonna be the next big play there, is getting
Beautiful.
that one up and running and making that look sexy.
I love that. I would recommend Story Brand, Building a Story Brand by, I think Donald, what's his name? I don't even remember the guy who wrote
Building a
that.
story brand. I like
Building
that.
a story brand. It's really good. It'll help you. It'll walk you through building your website, kind of positioning yourself as like the guide instead of like, you know, hey, look at me, right? Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to position yourself as the guide to your target audience of those A tier celebrities. Beautiful. All right, Rhett. Hey, thank you so much for coming on, man. How can people find you? What's your website and what's your Instagram?
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Noah. So, my website is billiondollar.brands.us, and then my Instagram is at Sirrett. SIRRHETT.
Beautiful.
Thank you guys. See you online.
Hell yeah.